You can just sense the twitchy nervousness in the air, can't you? Happy New Year and all of that. I hope you like the new library. I think it's rather swanky, don't you? Now, before I get started with this rather contentious subject, I got a bunch of things to get off my chest here. Seeing as I want to be known as the most honest person on this website, and I have no issues with transparency, I'll be upfront with people here. A couple of days ago is the first time in nearly 1,000 videos that I legit went on a purging spree and muted a whole bunch of people. Although bear in mind it was less than a handful. I'm not a free speech absolutist, so don't be too surprised. I believe bad action should have consequences, and that includes when being a gimp. The stupidity is beginning to actually irk me on a personal level, and if a handful of wankers are making me sour on talking to the audience in general, then I feel I owe it to the ones who don't make me see red to ice the ones that do. I know I'm not the only one who noticed this, because in all of my years of doing YouTube, the last few weeks was legitimately the first time people actually messaged me to ask, why is the comment section acting like a bunch of imbeciles? What you said was really mild. I thought, oh great, it's not only me, it's just a broken bucket of agitated spackers. Ek sê dit sommer in Afrikaans, net sodat die mense by die huis my kan verstaan. Ek het daai post gelees en gedink, vragies waar, as ek hierdie twak moet elke dag lees, dan gaan hierdie mense my bedonderd maak. Hierdie klompie moet net nou stil bly, anders gaan ek mense se nek omdraai. Geen wit mens moet dit of te hanteer nie. Nee, dankie. And yes, I do speak a second language, there you go. Now, one of the things that I like to do around here when discussing the more sensitive topics is to strip them down to the bare-bone components, if only to get rid of the emotion clouding people's judgment. And if we were to do this with censorship right down to its function, what do you have? It's the prohibition of an action or behavior enforced by some power or authority for whatever justified purpose. And that's basically it. It's enforcement of a standard, really. Now, when would you say is your first contact with this mechanism as a human being? I would say, well, if you had decent parents anyway, it's probably being told not to swear. Although don't get me wrong, hearing a kid drop an expletive when they have no idea what it means is pretty funny. Not appropriate, but it is pretty funny. Now, as a kid, you don't know the weight of any of this, they're just words. But you respect the authority of your elders, and then of course you become a rebellious teenager and that goes out the window for a while. But when you become an adult and you hear a child swear, what's your immediate reaction? You judge the parents. So when you get older, you understand that this was instilled into you because it serves a purpose. It's a standard that benefits your society. One coming from an authoritative body that you respected that's familial and proximate, your family. However, when a similar application comes at you indirectly in, say, various art forms, now the function becomes more objectionable, let's say. When applied by this body that is completely disconnected from you, it ceases to be an authority and instead takes on the form of an intrusive power, who without the familial ties feels not only forced, but also judgmental. As a consequence of this, given that it lacks respect, it instead ends up fomenting an attitude of contempt and rebellion. Now the trouble is, we are social creatures. This is a feature of all mammals. You will always have this mechanism. It is the bedrock foundation of any civilization. Whether this be a place of business, a social setting, any place you share with other humans, you have a code of conduct that's enforced in some manner. On a broad scale, this is a product of generations. You need a certain amount of conformity in order to maintain stable social cohesion. That's just the reality of the situation. And to bring up our favorite Spaniard, next to General Franco naturally, as Cortez pointed out, there are two forms of control in society: internal, religion; external, politics. In the civilization hierarchy, you have the peasantry and the king, and between the two exists a symbiotic relationship. The king looks after the well-being of his people. He is entrusted with the power of protection, to act with a sense of nobility, respectfully with the power that he holds. Meanwhile, the peasantry too must behave appropriately and not abuse the power of freedom that they have, conduct themselves with a sense of propriety. As according to Joseph de Maistre, liberty has always been the gift of kings. Essentially, you can, but why would you want to? Both sides are entrusted with the freedom that they have, the king not to abuse his subjects, and the subjects not to cause a stir that might force the king to raise an iron fist. In a healthy and sane society, there's an expectation of duty. State intervention should always be a last resort. Now, there's a saying I'm sure many of you are familiar with: everyone is a conservative about what they know. I have my own version of this: everyone is a libertarian for their own vice. However, should the local customs fail at curbing the excesses of these vices to the point where it is prohibiting the duty expected of the citizenry, people will inevitably turn to the power of the state in order to rectify this. On the one hand, you have the regulating power of shame, soft power. On the other hand, the intrusive power of the state, hard power. Now fast forward into the modern day and things are ever so slightly more complex. Ever since the advent of radio and television, mass communication was always going to be used for propagandistic purposes. Read Jacques Ellul's propaganda. Highly recommended. Gaming falls into this category as well, added with an additional layer of interaction. And let me address the plebs who shriek, "Oh, but the satanic panic, the Bush era, give me a frickin' break." The late 90s, early 2000s period is considered by many to be the heyday of gaming. Most of you are barely hitting puberty. You sound like a bunch of paranoid shell-shock patients. Shut up. To bring it back to the propaganda and parenting theme here, when gaming was still, well, at least by today's standards anyway, still relatively niche, what you had was a sort of largely lax parenting view on gaming, for the most part. Moralizing, yes, well-meaning, but ultimately unpopular for that. Problem is, after gaming became more and more popular and you removed the defense of the moralists, you caught the eye of the social engineers. So instead of the lax parents, now you got the single Skittle Squad mother dictating to you and forcing her worldview down your throat. You should have stuck with the moralists. When gaming was less popular and more niche, the product was objectively better. Something that appeals to everyone ends up appealing to no one. It turns out throwing money at something doesn't produce better results. Shocker, not a surprise, look at government. Now, the problem these types don't want to acknowledge is that the world of the uninhibited free market is not real. If you talk to a game about what kind of society they want to live in, it sounds like this. A city where the artist would not fear the censor, where the scientist would not be bound by petty morality, where the great would not be constrained by the small. If that sounds familiar to you, it should. It's Bioshock's Rapture. And yes, the irony is not lost on me. That's the world they want to live in. Again, it's not real. Now, after getting pummeled into submission, essentially being the slop-eating guinea pigs for probably more than a decade, gamers now for some reason believe they are nearing the end of the tunnel with so many things tanking and losing a colossal amount of money, and apparently the emerging Chinese market. We'll get back to that one in a bit. The problem that I personally have with the destruction of traditional gender roles is it is decaying moral decency in society and resulting in the commodification of far too many things, namely sex, to the point where it is cheap, losing value, and reducing it to the lowest common denominator. The market is not moral, people, it just caters. I've used this example before. If I'm in a room full of heroin addicts, guess what the market demands? Heroin, which is not exactly great. Rational perhaps, yes, but it destroys human capital. Or take this, for example. People complaining about censoring, not being able to peek up an animated female skirt. A massive fuss was kicked up over this, apparently. Let me ask you blokes a question. If you were looking to date a woman, would you tell her this is something you publicly cared about? No, because no woman worth her salt would think you're worthy of her. They would judge you to be a loser, and they would be right to do so. You know who I blame for this nonsense? You cheap, ill-disciplined, no-standard-having, slop-eating swine. These are not gamers. These are nothing but cheap sex addicts. You know how I know this? Because when Stellar Blade's hype was all the rage and that French IGN article came out, myself and Harmful Opinions were about the only people who read the damn article and noticed the overwhelming majority of said article, whoever wrote it, was lavishing the game with glowing praise. Oh, but how dare I actually read a gaming article and notice they're speaking positively about a game's gameplay? Oh, no one gave a flying ass about any of that. Because the writers were critical of Eve's physique and didn't get in line with the rest of the sycophantic gooners and immediately glaze her with their gene juice, he was decried as some kind of heretic. There was a moment that I realized these people are nothing but a bunch of unprincipled, entitled bastards. They will be as puritanical as the very people they criticize, but they will turn around and justify it just as fast for their own cause. Utterly shameless hypocrites. Oh, and speaking of something that needs to make a comeback, I'll return to that in a moment because there was something really stupid I saw I'm going to use as a segue back to that, which is the notion that Melanie Mack is going to be the next Anita Sarkeesian. Now, I am not unsympathetic to speculations. However, you're going to have to give me something more concrete than merely that ovarian concoction called emotion, harkening back to an era where the average character had a polygon count even lower than your IQ. Let's examine the evidence here, shall we? Anita knew nothing about gaming, and still doesn't. Had a whole bunch of really shady funding, probably traced back to some state entities, who knows. Totally astroturfed. Melanie does not have any of these ties. In fact, I'm pretty sure she's been blacklisted by a whole bunch of places, so that eliminates that. So what's left? Her follower count? Well, let's see, she annoys a whole load of people in general. Well done to her for that, by the way. On the one hand, the f***its by calling them f***its, and on the other hand, the degenerates by calling them degenerates. She has some rather unpopular takes at times that I was told the magical free market would somehow compete out. So there's other creators and voices bigger than her, so that eliminates the follower power. So where is the origin? Where is the nexus point of power of this one girl? Do tell! Oh wait, I know what it is. In fact, I could see glimpses of this when she said in a recent tweet that asked, "Is this what gamers want?" Not me, I'd feel like a total loser playing something like that. Some of the comments were unusually aggressive, rather hostile, and unsurprisingly, didn't address anything Melanie said. I surely have no idea what that feels like, do I? The tweet was how she would feel. It doesn't reference anybody else. So the ones that were openly offended to the point of attacking her personally, they took that to heart of their own volition. Well, that says more about them than it does her now, doesn't it? Why the reaction? Oh, I know. It's because Melanie is objectively attractive and thus has the power to judge and shame them, which is absolutely based, and I fully encourage her to do so more often. She is significantly north of her detractors. And I know this because when those in power in the production and marketing pipeline attack the gamers, no one cares. But when Melanie, who is not connected to the apparatus of power in any meaningful way, merely expresses her disapproval as a customer, oh, suddenly she is the harbinger of censorious doom. Why? These people need to get a life. They're insane. Because here's the real score about this entire situation. None of these people give a damn about censorship. They're the flip side of the radical left tards they claim to oppose, the opposite arse cheek. One side wants this bogus myth of acceptance because of some insanely dystopian concoction under the guise of equality. Meanwhile, the other side chases consumerism justified by catering to market demands. Both sides, however, ultimately crave the same thing: acceptance and a world without shame, aka normalization. No thank you, I did not oppose the dregs of DEI only for it to be replaced by the primitive slop designed to titillate the pigs. I am not a consumer of the trough, I am a customer of vastly superior quality. And let me just make this perfectly clear, in case you hear someone say, oh, Spoon is pro-censorship. No, clip this and play it at them. No, he isn't, he's just really judgmental, a really conceited, self-righteous asshole. And if people are offended by that, well, bollocks to them, I know I'm right. I don't care to be adored by people I have no respect for in the frickin' first place. I will shame them the same way I judge anyone with a hentai folder. And if that includes any of you watching this, you're a sad, pathetic excuse for a male. Now, with all of that being said, let me end this rant discussing China's role in the gaming world. And this is assuming China is funding the DEI infection in the West, either with the objective of crippling the industry to divert attention to the Chinese market or tanking the stock value of companies so they can be bought out. And so, the argument from Westerners in the wake of all this is, well, I'll just buy my games from China. What about all the censorious shenanigans that China pulls, or the CCP? Oh yeah, that's right, gamers don't care about any of that so long as it doesn't impact them. Very much rules for thee and not for me. Now I've heard the justification. Well, they only fund a portion of it. I already buy other things from China. Oh, how convenient that is. They didn't drop the bombs that destroyed my city. No, they just funded their creation. I can sympathize if this is a matter of necessity, but gaming is a luxury. And an argument that V made that frankly blew my mind was him saying he doesn't blame the people funding it, only the people taking the money. And I'm there thinking, okay, let's examine this situation. In the ideal world, the investors front the cash, the producer makes the product, and the consumers buy it and a worthwhile profit is generated. Again, the ideal world. However, we do not live in the ideal world. These massive multi-trillion-dollar firms are burning through money, not with the intention of making products for you, only propaganda at you. Those who tell them, don't take the ESG bucks, make products for us or else we'll buy from China, are insane and full of shit. You're trying to make the moral case for your money, naturally because you're the consumer. All the while, you completely ignore the incentives of the money coming from the likes of BlackRock and Vanguard. It strikes me as insane to tell these people to stand on your principle that only your money matters as you threaten to buy from China, funding the very entity that is greasing the hands of the people you claim are too weak-willed. You want these people to sacrifice short-term pain for long-term gain as you sit on your fat ass demanding everything and sacrificing nothing. If this is your attitude, you're full of shit, you're an entitled junkie. The market isn't free, and guess what? Neither are you. You are too weak to abstain from consumerism. You're a slave to your impulses and you're pussy whipped by pixels. That doesn't make you base, it makes you a bitch. Cheers for watching once again. I apologize for nothing.